But you understand that when you say like, things are have a basis in religion. That's what you mean by that statement is not what this guy means. If you were to make the same statement,
Yeah, he's saying God. He's talking about the God in the sky.
right?
Yeah.
But he's also making he's making a moral claim because he's saying because things had some genesis in religion, because like everything had a genesis in religion, because this was obviously religion was used for men and women to
Structure their
describe
lives.
the structure of their
Yeah.
lives, to describe phenomenon that they didn't understand because we
No.
didn't
Wrong.
understand science.
Wrong.
It's multiple. No, it's
Wrong.
multiple things. It's
Never.
multiple things.
No. It's not a failed
How is it
science.
not? How is it not?
Well, religion is the form of government when you have no government. It's the law.
Right. But
Yeah.
it goes beyond that because we wouldn't describe it was encompassing all parts of life
Nobody
before there
cares
was
about
structure.
science though in their normal daily lives. So I think conceptualizing
That's not.
religion as a
Wait a
failed
minute.
science
Okay.
is not a good thing.
No, you're conceptualizing it way too narrow.
No,
Okay.
you said it was a failed science. You said it was
No,
religion
no.
was used
Listen,
to
listen.
explain the world.
That it was. Are you denying a fact?
Well, to explain the world metaphorically, like a
No,
narrative.
literally,
No,
literally.
no.
What?
I don't buy into literal interpretations of
I know
religion.
you don't. Wait, I know you don't because you're
Some
atheist.
some do, but they only do it, I think, reflexively because of the anti-theist movement.
Okay, you
Because
understand? I'm not.
anti-theists came out and said,
Okay,
"We describe the world scientifically, and your
okay.
religion is completely bogus, wrong, and you need to shut the fuck
You
up
you
and give up
you've
your
jumped
religion."
1,000 years in the future, Adam. I'm
Hmm.
talking about when the religions were created
Hmm.
thousands of years ago.
Yeah, they
Okay,
weren't meant to describe the world at all.
you
Yeah,
don't think that thousands of years ago, when people created these religions, they didn't literally think they were true?
no, not in the
What are
sense,
you What are you basing that off of?
not in the sense that they described the creation of the world. They thought
Of
that
course,
it
of
was a
course they did.
creation myth.
2,000 years ago, people, or even 4,000 years
Yeah.
ago, 5,000 years ago, people would read the Old Testament and they would think that God created Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden and that literally happened and that a snake literally convinced Eve to eat this forbidden apple. They thought that was true.
Perhaps maybe some people did, but I don't think
The
it was
majority of people
everybody.
thought that was true.
You're saying that in the past the majority of people were biblical literalists.
Yes.
And they thought, maybe. I mean, I don't even know how you would determine
Wait,
something like that.
don't you? That was the whole thing with them arresting, was it Copernicus, for saying that the Earth revolved around the sun?
Yeah, undermining
He's undermining the literal
religious
religious dogma,
authorities. Yeah,
right?
exactly.
By claiming a scientific truth that would go against the literal interpretation
Yeah,
of
I
what.
don't. I don't know if I buy that stuff. I
What?
feels like
What
it's
do you mean?
the
Don't? It
anti.
happened. I don't know what you mean by you don't buy it. It
Well,
happened.
I've only ever encountered that stuff from totally biased sources that
Mm-hmm.
were very anti-religious. So it's made me question those narratives continually. Like I don't know that I've heard the other side of that argument, the other side of the argument that it was some political dispute that
I
got
mean, I've never heard
escalated.
anyone make the argument that you're making. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say this.
Oh, okay. I mean, I hear other religious folks talking about how there's a long tradition of conceptualizing religion metaphorically and not as a way to describe the world scientifically, materialistically. I mean, maybe Paul Vanderklay would even make that argument.
Why do you like?
I know the argument that you're making. You're saying
Well,
that
I mean, but even
there
even
was
in a
this
recent.
science, Galileo had this science, and there was a dispute over the church, and the church was trying to stifle scientific
I
development.
mean,
I don't know that I buy that, though. I honestly don't.
it happened. I don't know. Like, there's not really a disagreement that did happen. I mean, and if
Well, I
you
mean,
want to look at even
Galileo
in
was
our
incarcerated. We know that. Yeah,
right,
totally. But I've only ever heard this narrative framed by anti-theists. And all I'm
okay,
saying is I question that narrative because I haven't heard the other side of the argument. Sounds like you
I've
don't question that narrative at all.
I've heard I've heard this. I've heard people talk about Galileo being imprisoned that are not anti-theists. I've heard tons of
Mm-hmm.
people talk about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. What do you mean? What talk about Galileo being imprisoned and like the church the church having an assault on science. I guess that's basically what we're talking about. You've heard tons of people talk about that are not anti-religious people.
That aren't anti-theist.
Who?
Like everyone growing up that talking about this. I don't think my teachers that were like, my science teacher was an anti-theist.
Mm-hmm.
And she was like, oh, this thing happened.
Yeah, that I know the narrative. Yes.
Okay.
The religion is anti-science. That's the narrative.
So wait a minute. So when like in our modern American history, when there was this huge controversy that wanted to make it illegal to teach evolution in school.
I know that. Yes, I know. I know all of that.
Was that fake news? Like, I don't understand what you're saying.
I very specifically said that there has become a culture war that
I see.
I believe the anti-theists possibly started. So if the anti-theists come out and say, listen, they start a narrative that religion is bullshit, total nonsense, that we have science and we don't need religion anymore, right? That's the narrative. If religion is not really conceptualized as a science, all of a sudden they're forcing the opposition to conceptualize religion as a science. So yes, people are going to reflexively think of religion, start accepting their framework. Religion explains the world. So they're going to go to their texts and they're going to start, trying to debunk evolution or whatever they believe, just because it's on that side. It's what they believe. Evolution is coming. It's trying to destroy our religion, the thing that we find sacred. We need to fight against it. How do we fight against it? So they forced that conceptual framework, but I don't know that conceptual framework began before the atheist push.
I would imagine that throughout human history, that yes, there have obviously been religious figures who have pushed for interpreting religious literature metaphorically and not.
Yeah, I would say most of them.
Well, yeah, but I don't know what you're basing that off of, because I've never heard anyone bring evidence to claim that the majority of religious dogma was interpreted metaphorically. I mean, I'm talking. You think about like why the Jews in the New Testament, the Jews had to make the pilgrimage, every year to go to the temple, and they had to go buy animals to sacrifice to God. Like, why are they killing animals and sacrificing to God if they don't believe some literal interpretation of the Bible? Why are people keeping all these kosher laws if they don't believe in a literal interpretation of the Bible?
Yeah, I understand the narrative. I'm not sure that it's like you're basically saying Adam must accept narrative.
No, I'm asking you, what's the point? You're saying that you don't think the majority of people historically believed in literal interpretations of Judaism and Christianity, and I'm saying I've never heard anyone ever make that claim in my life.
I don't know.
That sounds totally bonkers to me.
I don't know. The reason that I'm skeptical of it is just I've debated enough anti-theists that want to conceptualize every single religious person as a biblical literalist.
Sure.
And when I encounter the other side of that argument, and I do, that religion was never really conceptualized as a science until science came along and started forcing religious people to conceptualize it that way. It seems like they have an argument. So the argument that they're making, totally biased arguments, I'll admit, are made by, theological people, who tend to have an axe to grind about the believability of God. Maybe they're making those arguments because, they're rewriting the past, because they believe science is one. We can't compete with science. We have to put down the guns. Let's fight on a level that we can compete on. Maybe they're rewriting history, but I just there's two narratives here, and you seem to be rebelling at the fact that I'm considering maybe the narrative that you've clung to all your life, knowing
Well,
your gut is true.
it's
Maybe
not a
it's
question
not
of it.
true.
It's not a question of it. I've never heard someone make this argument you're making before, which goes counter to everything I've ever researched in my life. And it seems like you're coming to this conclusion on the basis of like, well, because you argue with anti-theists and they straw man one side. I'm like, well,
No, I
anti-theist
hear
straw manning has nothing to do with anything.
people. I hear religious people make this argument that religion, like, yes, 1,000 years ago, nobody took the Bible literally. Like, they all knew that they were just stories.
Why were they killing each other over this religious shit if they didn't take it literally?
Hey, this isn't my argument. Like, okay, dive in. I don't know. Knock yourself out. Like, how do you even know that? Like, what do you want to do? Get in your time machine and go back 2,000 years? And
well,
ask them,
now you're
did you literally believe that Adam?
Now you're making the Kent Hovind argument.
Well, no. What if we got?
Move on.
What if we What if we got in our time machine and we got out and we went back 2,000 years and we started asking the people and they laughed in our face like fucking talking snake? What do you think? You don't know.
Yeah, but I'm sure. Okay, I'm sure that
those dum-dums from the past.
No, I'm sure that there are people that are very knowledgeable about religious history.
Yeah,
I would say.
I agree.
That would say, Sitch and Adam. It's very simple. If you just go through, because you look through, just Christianity itself. They have all these monks and religious people write all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Okay, they write all their thoughts down, and they'll see someone from like 300 or whatever saying like, I don't think the Bible should be interpreted literal, and then you'll see someone that says, well, I think the Bible does be interpreted literal. I'm pretty sure this stuff's all pretty heavily documented.
I mean, a lot of the things that I'm talking about seem like they're ideas that are kind of Jordan Peterson has promoted, that the Bible was never taken really.
I don't remember him ever saying that.
Taken metaphorically.
I don't remember him making the argument that it was never taken scientifically.
When science came on the scene, it really started changing things. It did. Like what are you objecting to? Like, you basically are objecting to, you have a narrative that the Bible was always conceptualized as an explanatory book about the world. Like, this was the science book of the world.
No.
Okay, so what's your argument?
I'm saying that religion was very broad and wide encompassing in the ancient world, okay? Mm-hmm. It was a moral system, and part of the moral system is explaining why the world is the way it is, right? You can't have a moral system without explaining why the world is the way it is and the way the world ought to be. And part of that is explanation of things like famine, drought, weather, why bad things happen to good people. These are all related to the moral system. They all need explanations and answers.
Those things diverge wildly from the factual real world, obviously.
Obviously, but but people didn't obviously understand science. They didn't know what stars in the sky were. They didn't know what any of this stuff was. Okay, they didn't understand what creates, a hurricane or a tornado or any of this crap.
But Peterson himself has said those people were not materialists at all. They conceptualized life and the world as a narrative. Like, he said that dozens of times.
Yeah, you're right. They
didn't even have the software to conceive of science.
And part of the exactly. And part of the narrative was the narrative of religion. It was like, oh, God is unhappy with me, and that's why my crops didn't do well this year. That's why I have to go and sacrifice 20 pigeons, on an altar to God, to appease God. Mm-hmm. They believed this stuff was literal. I'm sure there were people that didn't, but I think the widespread mainstream idea was a literal interpretation of religion. And if you were to openly speak out against this, you would get killed for blasphemy.
Yeah.
I mean, look at Jewish art. There's you know why Jewish art isn't popular? You see all these like Christian arts, right? All these famous works of Christian art that have just dominated European art history. You know why there's no Jewish art that's famous?
No.
Because Jews aren't allowed to draw the human form.
Really? Oh my God.
It's considered blasphemous because part of it says is that Jews are not allowed to draw pictures of God. That's considered blasphemy. But God created humans to after God's own image. Therefore, you're not allowed to create any images of people whatsoever. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously they believe that literally. Otherwise, they would have been drawing a bunch of pictures of God and famous Jewish figures doing Jew stuff.
The chat is screaming, "What about Islam?" And I don't know how that has anything to do with this subject.
Well, obviously,
like we're talking about two different ways to conceptualize the world: a
yeah,
materialist view and a narrative view.
People are making the argument, I imagine, that that Muslims for many years, especially when it originally was created, believed in a very literal interpretation of Islam.
Mm-hmm. I wish that we had numbers on that. I wish that we really knew, like you could say,
okay,
out of 3 billion Christians, there is, 50% that are biblical literalists. If there's 50% that are biblical literalists, I'm telling you, like, okay, we're having a conversation here.
Well, wait a minute. 4%, are you talking about now or are you talking about in the past? Because those are two very different questions, right?
Right. I guess.
I mean, maybe. I don't know. You could look up the numbers for who believes the Bible now, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about historically.
Yeah.
Anyway,
let's move on. I don't feel qualified to talk about like what specifics of the Bible. I haven't cracked a Bible in 20 years.